Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, I have more stories from all over the place, including a viewer story, and they're all about cryptids. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Oh, and there may be some background noise. I filtered it out as best I could on most of it, but it's minus 30 here, which is minus 22 Fahrenheit, and it's cold. So that's my heater in the background. But anyways, let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Back in 2016, I saw something that scared the hell out of me. This one night, I was taking the trash out as the following morning was trash day, so the cans gotta go to the curb. The driveway that I have is fairly long and I live in a pretty rural area. I also have this big canopy for boat storage that's set up right next to my driveway. So after I drop the trash can off at the curb, I'm walking back and I pass said canopy. I hear movement. I spin around. I see this dark figure with white lines all across its face with distinctive yellow eyes, darting for me, arms outstretched. Now I'm at the edge of my garage, mind you, and this canopy is several tens of feet from the garage, so I have a moment to reflect. This apparent humanoid is making verbalizations that I can't understand. To clarify, I mean I can't translate them, but something deep down inside me, something gnawing at my psyche, tells me that this language is not human. It's like it whispers yet screams at the same time, and I can hear it as though it's saying it right into my ears. I bolt for the door to my house. I press the garage door button and I turn around to see how close it is. It hasn't followed me in. Instead, it watches me. Its head twitches and moves about like it's analyzing. I still hear its speech in my ears. The light from the garage seems to reveal these outlines of fur. I can still hear these weird verbalizations until the door is fully closed. Then, I rush inside and look out the door entryway. I see nothing. I'm seriously creeped out. I'm not even kidding when I say I keep my shotgun by my bed that night. I go out the next day to look for signs of it, and I can't find any discernible tracks. Nothing was screwed with, nothing was broke into. There did appear to be a stick that was sharpened on one end that had burns around it, but that's probably from a fire that I had. Either way, I made sure to burn said stick pretty soon after. A couple of nights later, I was getting ready for bed and I glanced out the window. I see two small points of yellow light side by side that seem to flick off and on, like it's blinking. They're in the tall grass behind the boat storage. I grab my shotgun and I run out there, and I get ready to shoot whatever this thing is. The lights, I say lights because they were luminescent of their own accord, were still there. Those vocalizations started appearing in my head. I get the sense that I should just back off and go inside. And then I do so, against my better judgment. It was an eerie sense of calm that came over me. I woke up the next morning and I haven't seen anything for a few weeks now. Do any of you know what the hell it could be? I've heard about the Wendigo stories, but I don't know. I live in Minnesota. What the hell was it? So I have a few stories, but I'll do the one that scared me the most. I spent the past few months at this time accruing leave. I was working at the Jungle Warfare Training Center, way up north in the island. this island being somewhere near Okinawa, Japan. Work was really fun for me. I don't do a whole lot, but occasionally I teach other snipers on how to camouflage and work in the jungle. I had just gotten broken up with by one of the cute locals, and I was pretty bummed out, and I really didn't want to go to work with that on my mind. So I decided to use 2 weeks of leave that I had. We were in between training cycles, and a new sniper had just come to the JWTC. I decided I wanted to go on a camping trip near the border of the training area, technically outside of it, but I had told a few friends where I was just in case anybody came looking. There's no guns in Japan, so I couldn't do what I wanted to do, but I figured I would make the best of it. So I pack mostly food, a small pocket knife, a small thermal scope, a one-man tent, and a life straw. Oki is very rainy during this season, so water wasn't a concern. I also had my friends leave a few MREs by the wire so I could grab one if I needed it. I'm very experienced in this terrain, and I wouldn't recommend most people do this. Now that I've been out, I think that the whole thing was definitely me not thinking straight, just wandering off into the jungle like that. But, like I said, I was stupid at the time and I wasn't in the right headspace after being broken up with. I had planned for a 5-day trip, and I head out at midday on the first night. I spent most of the day just traversing the jungle and avoiding the highways. You're not exactly allowed to just camp in the jungle, but not many people visit the area, so it wasn't a huge concern for me. The sun starts setting through the trees, and the dark and gray clouds with the silver lining start rolling in. We're in for a nice rainstorm. So I set up my one-man tent and I crack open an MRE that I grabbed. I have this old iPod Nano that I bring into the field with me, so I plug in my headphones and I listen to some ambient music. I always keep a nudie or a swimsuit mag in my kit, so I whip out my sleeping gear and I get ready for the night. I start flipping through the pages of the swimsuit magazine while just listening to my gentle hymn of whale noises and stuff, and I hear the soft raindrops hitting the top of the tent. Life is pretty good right now. I feel at peace, so I doze off. Suddenly, I wake up to a huge weight hitting my legs. It hurts, but the rush of cool water soaking my jeans and shirt feels so much worse. I check my watch. It's 0200. I unzip my tents and look at what fell on me. The rain is absolutely horrendous, and after a few seconds, it feels like I just got out of a pool fully clothed. A good-sized branch had landed on my leg, ripping the bottom half of the tent to shreds. I turn my head, and right then, I see a pale girl staring at me, peeking behind a tree. My blood runs cold. I had been on the island for 2 years at this point, and much of it was in the woods. I had always seen shadows dart at the corner of my vision, but this time, I caught one looking straight at me. The girl notices that I made eye contact with her, and she quickly vanishes behind a tree. At this point, if I had a gun, I would have rushed her or something, but I was scared. So I quickly dipped my head back into the tatters of my tent. I kind of just sit there for a moment, in awe of what just happened. I don't want to move. I'm still too scared. I spend the next 15 minutes or so just sitting there, being as still as possible, trying to figure out what I should do. I conclude that the girl had to be just a hallucination, maybe a combination of stress of the situation and some kind of coping mechanism. I don't know. The chills start wearing down, and I try to decide whether or not to stay one more night and then ditch, or to start booking it back now. Then, through the rain, I hear Japanese, followed by this piercing scream that echoed just underneath the cacophony of rain and thunder. I've pretty much had my decision made for me that I'm going to leave. I scuffled around my tent, gathering anything important. I never got combat deployed, but finally my stealthy sniper skills are coming in handy. I slowly pack my bag. The magazine that I had is now completely drenched in water. My thermal scope still works though. I put it in my pocket. I sneak my leg through the tears in the tent, and then I kick the branch off. The branch had landed right on top of my iPod Nano. I can still hear the sweet whale whispers through the headphones. I take it and I shove it in my pocket. Everything is packed up and ready. I start mentally preparing myself to see this thing again. I grab one strap of my pack. As my hand is going down, my hand feels something rubbery and slippery, but it ends up just being the case of something else that I had forgot to actually pack. I get up and sling my backpack over my shoulder. I always put my head down in the direction I have to travel. I dive into the trees and I start booking it. I can't really see or hear anything through the rain. What I do have is this crappy bent flashlight that the Marines issue us in boot camp on the strap of my pack, but I decide not to use it. I don't want to see that girl, or whatever it was, again. I'm able to keep a decent pace despite the darkness, the fog, and the rain. Luckily, the branch was curved, so its full weight wasn't resting on my legs, or else I'd probably still be in the tent. I start feeling uneasy. I can't describe it, but it's an intense feeling of dread that starts falling over me. I feel like I'm being chased, but I can't see anything coming after me. I start to get close to the fence line for the training area, and I hit the fence about 2 minutes later. There's an immediate sense of relief. The fence is about 8 feet high and has some old-style barbed wire on top. My pack is light without the tent or food, so I throw it over the fence, and then I hear a thud. Something is behind me. I immediately go prone, and I whip out my thermal. I scan the tree line with one eye on the thermal and one eye on nothing on the other. I see a sleek, black figure walking 20 to 30 feet between the trees. The shadow dips from the gaps of one tree to the next, but it's clearly coming after me, stalking me. I freak out even more. I stand up and release a deafening guttural war cry. Memories of the senseless yelling of the DIs at Paris Island flood back. I whip out the rubber case thing I had, and I throw it in the direction of the figure, and I start climbing the fence. I jump down, grab the pack, and I see the dirt road that leads back to the buildings in the training area. It didn't mess with me for the rest of the way, and I'm still unsure if what was chasing me was supernatural, or if it was something else, pretending to be a little girl. I didn't get to see what clothes she was wearing, if any, but ask anyone who has stayed at Camp Gonsalves for more than a few weeks and they'll have stories about things in the woods. So I have something that happened to me that I'd like to talk about. It was in the summer of 2014. I wanted to complete the Stalker Challenge. I found this abandoned cement barge that was beached on a sandbar in this wooded coastline. It seemed like the perfect place to camp, so I brought my gun, 2 magazines, which were all that I had at the time. I had no money. So I went to check out this barge, and it was pretty sick, to be honest. There were barnacles growing on some of it, so I assumed that at high tide it was partially submerged. It had a cargo hold and an upper deck. There were 2 portholes in the upper deck, with rusty ladders that descended down into the cargo hold. I decided to camp on the beach where the sandbar connects to dry land because I didn't want to drown in my sleep or something if high tide completely covered the vessel somehow. So before I got all set up, I wanted to check out the barge a little more first. I noticed that there was some rusted out metal stuff in this little square pool on the upper deck. I reached down into the water and I pulled out a rifle casing. I recognized it as a nagant, so after some time of poking around, I finally get finished closely examining all the cool old rusted bits of the barge, the valves, moorings, etc. I head over to the beach to make my camp. I paced it off. It's about 60 or so yards from the barge. Not quite your typical measurements for this challenge, but what's 10 yards in the difference? I made a little fire pit even, with some rocks that I found just for shiggles. I put driftwood on it, I whipped out my Zippo, and I lit it up. I looked at my watch, and it was about 4 o'clock at this time. Oh, and to mention as well, there was a part of the upper deck where the barge was split in two. Anyhow, I'm sitting on the beach in front of my weak fire, my gun laying by my side. I pull out a green plastic dollar store harmonica. I have no idea how to play a harmonica, I just want to make noises with it. After a minute or so, I figure out the Jaws theme with it, and then I laugh to myself at what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out the national anthem to pass the time. And then I hear laughter coming from the trees. I stop playing. I look over. I ask, "Hello?" The laughter continues, the same tone as before. It kind of sounds like me, come to think of it. I begin to smell that oh so great metallic smell that's in all of those other encounters. The smell is kind of salty though. I was camped down by the sound, mind you, so it was already a little salty and already smelled a little bit weird, but this smell was, I guess, saltier than normal, which is what made it stick out. It's still only 5, not even sundown. I'm scanning the tree line, but I don't see anything. I reach for my harmonica to resume playing, and then I realize that the smell isn't metallic at all. It just strongly resembles, like, bodily fluids, I guess is the best term for it. And then I hear the laugh again. I begin to put 2 and 2 together, and I chamber around in the rifle. "Hello?" I ask again. I sit there staring at the woods for a long time. Nothing happens. So I try to think that maybe it's somebody playing a prank. So I just cook my food on the fire. I had beans, glancing over at the woods periodically. And just as the sun was going down, it started up again. But this time, I heard a hello come from the woods. It sounded kind of like me, but not quite. I decided to pack my stuff up a bit, and I ran to the barge. I leapt up inside, and I frantically climbed up to the upper deck. I jumped across the huge crack onto the bow, and I went prone as quickly as I could, and I aimed my rifle back out across the sandbar, my eyes golf ball wide. I sit like that for a while. I check watch periodically. Just as the sun has finished setting, I realize that I'm definitely gonna want some fire. Once I'm sure that I see nothing, I go back down onto the sandbar, my rifle slung and at the ready. I gather up a little bit of driftwood. I struggle to get one going, but I light a rather weak fire up on the deck. I make one last trip just at the beginning of dusk, and I find some good wood, and the fire finally takes off and achieves a respectable size. I spend the first few hours of the night with my rifle shouldered, me laying prone, aiming down at the sandbar. I remember that several of my relatives have suffered from auditory hallucinations before, so I'm just thinking, okay, maybe I just hallucinated it. I hope I did. I should probably get that checked out after I get all this stuff over with. But then, I hear heavy breaking of brush from the coastline, and something muffled blows to me on the breeze. Laughter, and an unpleasant, salty smell. And I think, oh Lord, It's real. I hold my rifle tight. I pointed threateningly at the coast. It's pretty well dark by now. I remember that I brought a flashlight. I go over to my pack, laying on the deck by the stern, and I get it. I come back and shine it down along the sandbar. I see something glint as I sweep. I swing the beam of my flashlight back to the gleaming thing. 2 dots. They're eyes. Freaking eyes. Something big and dark is attached to them. It's pretty tall, too. It's just standing there halfway down the sandbar. I can't see it well. My battery was low, and it was kind of far away. I try to tell myself it's just an animal, but then I think it must be a big-ass animal. Is it a bear? But then I thought human eyes don't glow in the dark, so it can't be a person. It can't hurt to shoot at it, right? I chamber a round. A live round is ejected and skitters across the deck. I already chambered one on the beach. I'm a dumbass. I go prone again. I take aim. I touch one off. If only I had a flash hider instead of a slanted brake. I'm blinded for what felt like an eternity. I'm blinking frantically in hopes of restoring my sight the whole time. I get to the point where I can see again. I frantically shine my mag light up and down the sandbar. No eyes. Maybe I scared it off. I hear a crunching of gravelly sand below me, and then I hear it again. Hello? And it sounds more like me. I'm in full panic mode. I stand on the railing, and I point my rifle over the side, and I fire. And then there's this scream. It deafens me more than the rifle fire. But then, silence. For the next few hours, I hear and see nothing. Just nighttime. So I settle in. I got my legs in a sleeping bag. My head and arms are out with my rifle aimed at the portholes that lead down from the hold up onto the deck. A couple hours pass. My eyelids get heavy. Then I hear that laugh again. This time, it's below me. I nearly wet myself in sheer terror. I begin focusing intently. I hear small waves lapping up against the side of the barge. The tide has risen. In 10 minutes or so, I begin to hear sloshing in the hold below. Something is walking down around there, and it's beginning to fill with water. There can only be one direction this thing can go. Up. And then it says, hello, again, and I scream, shut the F up. I shove my rifle down the porthole and I blind fire like a madman. And then I realize, there goes all of my ammo. My heart is hammering. I slowly back away from the porthole. I hear something clanging against the metal. It's climbing the ladder. I unsheath the bayonet I have attached to my rifle. I don't know how that thing fit through the porthole, but it did. My fight or flight engages. There's nowhere to run to. I charge, screaming. It happened in a flash. The bayonet plunged into the thing. A heavy paw, or something, hit me across the chest, and I went tumbling off the barge and into the water. I now have no rifle, and I'm in the water. I decide to play dead. I lay on my back and hope it doesn't see me. My heart is still pounding uncontrollably. I try to remain still. I'm not worried about hypothermia because it's warm and it's June. I slowly drift away with the current. I see this hulking silhouette sitting next to the fire as I drift off. I end up staying with the current until it dumps me on a beach a few miles east. I hike home, and I never go to that place again, or anywhere near it for that matter. So this story was sent in to me by the Irishman, and I'll talk a little bit about the experience afterwards. When I was maybe 10 years old, my best friend, my brother, and I would play in the woods behind our homes in Vermont. We built forts, hiked, and created adventures in these woods every chance we had, and whenever we were not at the beaches of Lake Champlain, which was about 100 yards from my home. One day, my buddy and I found a perfect triangle of trees within a patch of large pines, and we noticed that it was darker than it normally should be. We checked around for quite a while, and our young minds couldn't reasonably understand why this area seemed darker. For whatever reason, and completely unspoken at the time, we avoided going into this triangle of trees. We decided to do what the older kids do, and waited for my brother to come back up into the woods to send him into the triangle. This occurred a few days later, and we convinced my brother to go into this triangle without sharing any information with him beforehand. He didn't hesitate and went straight into the triangle. Almost immediately, he leapt back out and spun around to look behind as if he expected something to be there. Both I and my friend were shocked, and I'm positive our facial expressions displayed this because my brother suddenly began sprinting away, and we followed and ran the whole way back to the house. We never returned to this area and actively avoided that section as long as we were in the woods. Of course, we eventually assumed that our young minds had just gave us the spook that day, but we never discussed it again until we were all older. The reason we even brought it up again was because of something that I had heard about in high school. When I was a senior, I had a class with my favorite teacher, who always took the last 10 minutes of Friday class to allow for storytelling. This one Friday, no one wanted to start, so the teacher decided to tell a story that he had heard years before from a Native American student. This student sat all year long in his class, listening to the other students telling stories. And at the end of the year, he finally decided to tell a brief story of his own. He said he had been told by a tribal leader that there were places in the Vermont forests that were known by the elders where the dimensions are skewed and can be used to the advantage of those who know them. These spots were used to hide from danger while hunting. These areas were typical a triangle of trees that one would enter and turn ever so slightly, change from 3D to 1D, and become as thin as paper in the vision of those outside the trees. Now, you can imagine hearing this floored me as I instantly associated this story and our triangle of trees from my youth. At the time, I had not lived in that house nor near these woods for 5 years, but I always planned to go back there and find that triangle. Almost a decade later, I moved back near the old house, which was no longer standing, but a lot of development had occurred since then. I eventually saw the opportunity one day after taking a walk down a bike path that now cut through the old woods, but after jumping the line path fence and searching, I couldn't relocate that triangle of trees. I spent many nights considering my own experience and that student's story. I've settled on the belief that this may be how Bigfoot could hide. I've also wondered maybe if the triangles of trees that this student's elder spoke of were more than just a dimensional funhouse mirror. What if they were doorways that can be used by cryptids that are so often seen by people? What if people walk into these doorways and become missing 411 cases? What do you think of this? Now, I found this very interesting because I actually have heard of similar stories like this. Here in my province, it was a triangle of trees, a fairy circle, a ring of burned grass, or as well as a cluster of trees that may be of a different type than the rest of the forest or something weird like that. And there's also lots of cases of people who go missing in the forest or in the deep woods, and it's like they just disappear out of thin air. So maybe it's a similar thing to that. maybe it's like a phenomenon. I don't know. But it's very interesting to talk about, especially the Bigfoot aspect of it. And I had said in the email that maybe if Bigfoot is like more in tune with nature and stuff, or like a creature of nature, then they probably most definitely know all of these, I guess, tricks or dimensional pathways, or depending on your belief, because I've heard people believe that Bigfoot itself is an interdimensional being. So it kind of just, you could go any direction with it. It could really be just how open you want to be with it, I guess, is the best word. Because some people believe that cryptids are just like creatures we haven't discovered officially or named yet, or they could be extraterrestrial, that could be interdimensional. It's really hard to say. That's what makes all these phenomena so interesting, I think, is that we just don't know what they are. Yeah, I think it's quite possible that something like that, like a triangle of trees, or in the case of my province, certain just weird places in the forest could definitely have, I guess, properties like that. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's very interesting. So, yeah, thank you to the Irishman for sending that in. It was very interesting. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have any theories of your own? You can feel free to drop those in the comments too. Do you have a story of your own? I have an email in the description below, along with a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel. And I didn't want to go too long in that last story because I know some people just don't want to hear me talk about stuff, so I figured I would leave it off there, just in case that they just came there for the story and that they wanted to just skip to the end after that or whatever. You know, just making sure everybody can get what they want out of it. Anyways, the other thing that I thought of too, and this was something I learned about recently, but there seems to be a thing all over the world about isosceles triangles. Now, the theory is that if you pick any holy site in the world and you find that point and then the points of two of the highest peaks relative to the holy site, it always comes out to be an isosceles triangle. So I have to wonder is that if that's true, I wonder if it's the same in a forest, you know, like what if it's all isosceles triangles and that has some kind of meaning. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. That sounded a lot less crazy in my head, but now that I say it, it sounds kind of crazy. But maybe it's not, who knows. But yeah, it's really interesting how some people can just disappear like that into the trees. Especially in the sense is like if a hunter knew where it was, they could use it to conceal themselves from what they were trying to hunt. And if we can do that, that means that cryptids or Bigfoot can too. So, it's just kind of real spooky like that, isn't it? You could be in the woods, and there could be like a triangle of trees that you don't even see. That could be just like a Bigfoot just watching you walk by. I've often wondered if like Bigfoot have their own like culture kind of thing, because I remember hearing that they do bury their dead. So that's pretty wild as well. I wonder if they ever make fun of humans. I don't know. I'd like to see that. Just like a Bigfoot wearing a plaid shirt and be like, oh, I'm a human. But anyways, I'll stop rambling now, and I will let you all go. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me, and thank you for watching. If you like what I do, then you can like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.